Hello and welcome to today's special episode of Resilience in Dark Times. Today we're going to look at resilience in the TV show Stranger Things. Now don't worry, there'll be no spoilers. So if you haven't seen the final episode or even the final season or the final last two seasons, don't worry, I will not spoil anything in this episode. And also, if you're not familiar with Stranger Things, that's okay. I will tell you everything you need to know to understand what we're talking about. Because today we're going to look at the different patterns, behaviors, beliefs, practices that are evidence in Stranger Things that cultivate resilience. How are these characters resilient? How are they not resilient? When are they resilient? What goes into that? But more than that, we're going to do a deep dive into play and especially tabletop role-playing and how that can facilitate resilience, and as well as the imagination and what qualities are in tabletop role-playing that show up in the show itself, and what can we use in our own lives to cultivate our resilience and to bolster ourselves up in these difficult times. For those of you familiar with the show, you know that I normally read a story, a folktale, a myth, something like that. Today, the myth, the story, the folktale is going to be the 5 seasons of Stranger Things. So that will be the backdrop. So if you want to dive deeper and you haven't seen it yet, that's where you can go to understand more deeply what we're talking about. And if you've seen it already, maybe after today, you'll look at it differently and you'll want to go back and watch it again. I'll also share my own experience and parallels between my life and the lives of the characters in Stranger Things. So all that and more today in Resilience in Dark Times, Resilience in Stranger Things. You're listening to Resilience in Dark Times. I'm your companion and guide, Michael Glavin. Whatever brought you here, I'm glad you found us. This is a space for honest conversation, practical strategies, and the kind of hope that comes from facing reality together. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back. If you were expecting me to talk about resilience essentials, I will do that next week. This seemed to be urgent, timely, topical. My wife and I just spent the last couple months going back and watching every season of Stranger Things. From the first season all the way through the 5th season when the new episodes dropped, and we just saw the conclusion, the 2-hour conclusion on New Year's Eve. And we loved it. It was amazing. I highly recommend it if you're in any way interested in horror, sci-fi, coming-of-age, mishmash shows. Okay, so what is Stranger Things? Let's start there. Stranger Things is set in the 1980s. It goes from 1983 to 1989. And it's a coming-of-age story of middle schoolers all the way through high school. And so it harkens back to all those 80s coming-of-age stories like 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, all of those films. That's one layer. But then also it's a sci-fi horror film, and so it harkens to all those types of films too. E.T. and Amityville Horror and War Games, Back to the Future. I highly recommend the show. If you're not into gross things or horror, then okay, maybe it's not for you. I also don't think it's a good show for young children because it is scary at parts and it is really gross and sort of fantastical violence in parts. And so if you're sensitive to that, then just skip it. That's okay. But if you're okay with that, I think it's a really amazing story over 5 seasons. And in the final season, whenever the party members would do something really nerdy or scientific-y and they would sort of geek out on stuff, my wife and I would shout, "Nerds, nerds, nerds, nerds," to root them on. The story begins with 4 friends and they're in a basement and they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. We can't really understand Stranger Things unless we understand gaming, especially tabletop role-playing. Because the show is structured in a lot of ways like a scenario, a role-playing scenario, and a role-playing campaign. And that was not on accident. So you have these different levels. You have the characters playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then you have them acting as if they're characters in a role-playing game. And they're conscious of that fact. They refer to themselves as the party. They talk about wizards and sorcerers. They personify their fears of the enemy in terms of Dungeons and Dragons monsters and the monster manual. So Stranger Things and the plot of Stranger Things is inextricably linked to role-playing games and tabletop role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons in particular. Before we get into Dungeons and Dragons, let's just talk about play. And what is play? Why do we play? What are the benefits of play? If you look at mammals, especially social mammals, we play. If you look at wolves, little wolf pups, they play with each other, they wrestle, they chase each other. Polar bears and brown bears and black bears, cubs will play with each other and chase each other and run and sort of play like a tag game. Human children play tag and hide and seek. And so what's the benefit of that? Why do we do that? Well, I think it's because our brains, mammalian brains, we're really smart and we're really adaptive. We rely less on instinct and sort of pre-programmed things that we do in the world, and we learn and we adapt. We learn and adapt in our new environment. And so that gives us flexibility. And so playing is a way of practicing life skills in a fun way. Playing tag or hide and seek or chasing, those are hunting skills that we're practicing. We're getting good at them in a fun way. If you ever see dogs chasing each other, chasing a ball, they're having fun. They're enjoying it. It sure looks that way. And they're honing their hunting skills, which are really important once they become adults. So a benefit of play is practicing life skills in a safe environment so that when we need them in the real world, we'll have access to them. We'll be already good at that thing that we're needing. We'll come back to this more specifically, but let's talk about D&D. What is that? You might be like, tabletop what? Like role-playing what? What is this? My first experience with Dungeons and Dragons and any role-playing game was 1979, and my parents were divorced, and my dad would, whenever I would see him, he would have a stack of articles and books that he thought I was interested in. And one day he picked me up and he had this laminated, he was a high school English teacher. And so he had access to a laminator. So he had laminated this news article, and the news article talked about this game, Dungeons and Dragons, and how this kid was playing this and he went missing for weeks at a time. And he eventually turned up and he was okay. And so around that time, that fed into what was known as satanic panic. There was all these moms groups and religious right organizations that were afraid of heavy metal music and backwards masking in music, and there's all the demon worship and Satan worship, and so Dungeons and Dragons fell into that. And this story of this kid doing what's called live action role playing. They were playing, according to the story, playing Dungeons and Dragons in the steam tunnels in a college in Michigan. And he disappeared down there, and then he eventually surfaced and was okay. And so then that fed into the satanic panic, and D&D is ruining our kids and turning them to Satan worshipers and all sorts of terrible things. And so what did my dad do? My dad took me to the hobby store so we can get Dungeons and Dragons. And I remember I got the basic box set of Dungeons and Dragons. And it had a dragon on the cover and this wizard-looking guy and knights and stuff and like a dwarf or something on the cover. And, when I got home, I opened it up and they had this strange dice in it. There was a 4-sided dice, which is like a 3-sided pyramid, and a 12-sided dice, and an 8-sided die, and a 20-sided die. They're really cheaply made, and they came with a crayon because the numbers weren't filled in. So you had to take the crayon and rub it on the numbers on the die so they can show up. And it came with an adventure already in it. And as I read about it and learned, like, wow, the game is being a magic user, a fighter, an elf, or a thief and you get to be that character, and you have stats and abilities, and you get to explore this magical world, like in dungeons, and there are monsters and trolls and ogres and dragons, and there's reward, and you get together with your friends, and so one person is the kind of like a narrator who's setting things up and describing things, and everyone else is characters in this story, and you get to say what your character says and do what your character does, and you can create your own personality and your own identity. And for me, this was amazing. I was like, wow, this is really cool and creative. And so I got together with my friends and we started playing D&D and started creating these adventures and going through dungeons and exploring worlds. And that's what role-playing games are. And it's called tabletop role-playing because you're sitting around a table. And on the table, you're rolling your dice, and a 4-sided dice doesn't really roll much. It's sort of like popping it down. And a 20-sided dice, because it has all those sides, is closer to a ball and just kind of often rolls off the table. But those dice, those weirdly sided dice, instead of like just 6-siders, added to this incomprehensible magical realm. They're not Yahtzee dice. There's like a bunch of 6-sided dice that you roll. A 20-sided dice, a 12-sided die, an 8-sided die. These were strange dice in the strange world, and it opened up your imagination to different possibilities. You can think of role-playing as collaborative story making. So one person is sort of the narrator setting the scene and taking care of all the beings and the creatures in the landscape who are not the main characters. And then the players are the main characters in this story. And we're creating this story together. And then it's a game because there's dice involved. So your character has an intention to do something, but you don't know if you're going to be successful or not. Like, there's a treasure, you want to get the treasure, there's an ogre in the way, I have to fight this ogre to get that treasure. The narrator is called the dungeon master, the DM, or the game master, the GM. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to kill this ogre and get the treasure. The game master doesn't know if I'm going to be able to kill this ogre and get the treasure. So that's where the dice come in. You roll the dice, and that adds unpredictability and opens up different storylines and different possibilities, because you're planning on killing the ogre, but suddenly, I'm really damaged. It hurt me, it injured me. Now what do I do? Then, someone needs to come to my aid. Someone needs to help me and heal me. How else can we defeat this ogre? Maybe we need to outsmart him instead of using brute force. So it's collective storytelling, but nobody knows where it's going to go or what's going to happen, because you have this element of chance involved. That's where the dice come in. So people will remember the time would ask me, well, how do you win? And it was just such a weird question. It's like, well, you keep playing. That's how you win. Like, there's no winning. It's not like Monopoly where you have an objective, you can get that objective, and then boom, one person wins. You have a story, and you try to accomplish goals, and you might accomplish the goal, but that goal, like life, usually leads to some other complication or a different goal, or your goals change, or you achieve what you wanted to achieve, but then that's undermined by something else. So the point in role-playing is not winning in some weird abstract sense. It's about playing the game. That's what is interesting. That's what's engaging, is the story and being engaged in the story. So what does this have to do with resilience? Well, remember, the purpose of play is practicing life skills that you're going to need later in other areas of your life. Role-playing can be seen as practicing resilience. I mean, think about it. First of all, you have a goal. You want to rescue someone, you want to get some treasure, you want to explore, you have some goal. And then you have these obstacles, monsters, traps, demons, weather, whatever it is. And the whole point is not to say, we give up. That's it. Let's just go home, not bother. No, the whole point of the game is confronting your fears and using your resources and your abilities and your skills as much as you can to confront those obstacles and overcome them. and to do that within a team, to ask for help, to help others, to cooperate as a team, and to take care of yourself. If when you get wounded, there's things called hit points. So it's a measure of your health. And if your hit points go down, then you can get healed, you can take time off, you can rest, you can recuperate. And that's really important. You want to face challenges at your best. So self-care is really important. And taking care of your party members is really important. This is a cooperative game. The different characters in the story are helping each other, they're supporting each other, they got each other's backs. And everybody's using their strengths to the benefit of the party. The fighter is going out in front and confronting evil monsters first and fighting with them. The magic user, who's more vulnerable and weaker, is staying in the back and maybe casting spells from the back. The cleric is healing people and tending to their wounds and asking for divine intervention. The thief is going to disarm traps, but risking their own life, just disarming a trap. So everyone's weaknesses are mitigated by the group, and the group benefits by the strengths of everyone. For the characters in the game, it builds solidarity, it builds a sense of collective action, diversity of tactics, using strengths, mitigating weaknesses, self-care, care for others. These are all practices of resilience. This is what resilient people do. And for the players themselves, they get a sense of group identity. They get a sense of acceptance. They get to be good at something, to overcome obstacles, to fail and have it be okay, to fail and have someone else pick them up or rush to their aid, to be tended to tend to others, to be the hero, to be the healer, to be the magic user bending time and space. And there's not a ton of research out there, but the research that there is backs up that tabletop role-playing games cultivate resilience in the players themselves. In one study, researchers wanted to know if playing D&D could improve the mental health, self-esteem, and self-efficacy of grown-ups. So they took 25 adults and they had them play just 1 hour of D&D every week for 8 weeks. So that's not very much time at all. And what they found was that there were significant decreases in depression, anxiety, and stress. And there was a significant increase in self-esteem and self-efficacy. So in this short time, just these 8 weeks, 1 hour a week for 8 weeks, we saw positive benefits for mental health and well-being. I won't go into all the studies here. I'll put links in the show notes. But research has shown the benefits for playing tabletop role-playing games, especially for more marginalized individuals, people with neurodivergence, or members of the LGBTQ community. Tabletop role-playing is a great way for anyone to have community and to practice resilience and to connect with other people and use your imagination and build self-esteem and confidence. I know for my own kids, during the pandemic, my older son played D&D online every week with his friends. And that really helped him stay connected to his social group throughout the pandemic when he couldn't see them in person. And my younger son started playing his own version of role-playing, in quotes, with his best friends. And they had their iPads and they would get together and they would just do this sort of joint storytelling where one of them would say something like, I'm a gnome magic user and I use my frost lightning spell against the dragon and it shoots out this thunderbolt of frost. And then the other kid would say, and then the dragon breathes its fire and melts the frost into a spray of water. And then I, as an elfin archer, shoot my bow at the dragon. And then my son would jump in and say, but that arrow is deflected by the dragon's tail. And he swings and hits me with his spiked tail, and I go flying. And then his friend would say, but then I catch you, and they would just go on and on like that for hours, just going back and forth, weaving this fantastical tale together where they would face obstacles and overcome them and use teamwork and trickery and deception. And it was just amazing to listen to them And this was, at a time when they couldn't see each other in person. They couldn't connect with their friends. They weren't going to school in person. And so I think it really helped both of my sons stay connected and stay resilient throughout the pandemic. So if you're interested in what the research says about tabletop role-playing and its benefits, just check the show notes and I'll have the links in there. So let's get back to Stranger Things. So Stranger Things starts off as 4 kids in a basement playing Dungeons and Dragons. And they're having fun, they're having adventures, they're facing their fear, they're confronting demons and monsters and working as a team to do that. And we see that in the first scene. And each season after that, it's like a D&D scenario. It's like a D&D adventure. Let's talk about the story arc of each of the seasons. And they're fairly similar, no spoilers. These are general patterns in the seasons. And normally, each season starts off with secrets. The different characters in the story have different secrets from each other. They're hiding who they are. They're not telling each other things. Parents and kids are really disconnected. There's maybe some conflict there. There's division, there's some hostility, there's isolation. And then there's the big bad, the bad guy, the enemy for the season, who has power and is growing in power. And as the fear of the people in the show grows, the power of the big bad grows. And we see violence against isolated individuals. These are individuals who are disconnected, have secrets, are alone or feel alone, and they are the victims of the big bad of whatever season it is. But then slowly the party, the main characters and the peripheral characters, they start to communicate more. They start to talk to each other a little bit more. They start to work through their differences. They start to insist more on authenticity, being who they are, showing who they are. And then if who they are then is accepted, then there's a solidarity built. There's a power built, there's then cooperation, and then the people work together and cooperate to take action together. And that's where the power is. And they each use their individual strengths for the greater good. And they each balance out the weaknesses of each other. The party forms an identity that can take collective action together to defeat the big bad. I saw some reviews of the season 5, and some of the reviewers who I don't think like the genre and don't like the show, they were saying that they didn't like the heart-to-heart talks in the show. But that's part of the whole point. Like, there's that communication, that authenticity, that solidarity, that connection, that real connection of authenticity and love and cooperation and mutual respect or mutual recognition to counter the big bad's connection, the tentacles of the big bad. We see how together we can face our fears. Together we can take collective action against those monsters out there. Together we can set things right. And we can do it from a place of authenticity and purpose and connection and solidarity. That even if we're different in some ways, that our differences on the surface are not that significant. Even though you're a jock and I'm a gamer, we're in this together. We're part of the same cause. We're doing this together for the greater good. One of the themes is that there's power in authenticity, that we let ourselves, if we're safe enough to be ourselves, to truly be ourselves, that there's a strength in that and a power in that. I think that's a really important message. And it's also equally true that when we're not safe, that not showing that part is also resilient. That there's a strength in that of staying hidden when it's not safe. And often the seasons begin in that state, that not safe state. And then the transition through community, through connection, through communication with the right people, that once we have our people, then we can be ourselves, then we can show ourselves, then we can be truly ourselves in this really amazing, powerful, incredible way. That's, I think, one of the beautiful things about the show is that finding that community, how important that is, both for us individually and for the group, for the people coming together, form a party which transcends each of them individually. We can do so much more as a collective that has mutual recognition, a collective that where we can be ourselves, where we can authentically be ourselves. So in that situation, we need those heart-to-hearts. We need to be able to say who we are and show who we are and have that be accepted. That's where real strength comes through. That's real communal strength. And that is powerful. Another theme of the show is using fiction to deal with overwhelming reality. And so there are these monsters that are discovered or uncovered, and they're so scary and so overwhelming. But the kids name them after creatures in D&D to make them less scary, more manageable. Once you name something and identify it as something, then you can deal with it. We can use our imagination to get enough distance, enough fictional wrapper around things, enough so that we can take action, so we can think about what to do and how to work with it. The characters use imagination to more fully engage with the world and take action in the world. Without that imagination, without that wrapper over it, the reality would be too overwhelming, too scary, too much to deal with. They even talk about the use of story to deal with loss and trauma, and how story can enable us to continue to live our lives to the fullest, to compensate or cope with some devastating loss and tragedy in our lives. Stories and storytelling can heal those wounds and make us be able to live our lives to the fullest, despite the losses, despite the trauma. And you might be wondering, well, how does this D&D playing really relate to the real world? Or, did they react the way that they did because they were gamers, or just because they're in this desperate situation? Are the two not really related? Well, let me tell you about my own experience. I went to high school during the time period depicted in Stranger Things. But my high school was a little different. Instead of a co-ed public high school, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. It was run by Christian brothers who are known for making brandy, not for their ability to teach children. When I went there, what I walked into was a brutal world of rigid hierarchies and these endless displays of dominance and submission. Corporal punishment was carried out as this sadistic ritual of humiliation for almost any violation, for a dress code violation, a hair code violation, for talking too much, for being out of line. Teachers would have the offending kid up in front of the class and have them turn around and face the class, and then tell them to bend over and grab their ankles or the desk in front of them. And then the teacher would pull out this massive paddle, a wooden paddle, and it would have holes cut in it to cut down the air drag so it would be swifter. I know I was paddled a few times because the hair on the back of my head touched the collar of my shirt. So it was a hair code violation. Another time I had missed a day of school because the evening before I went to see Ozzy Osbourne. It was an awesome concert. And so my English teacher found out about it. And so he took me out into the hall, and he seemed really upset. And he grabbed me by the collar and he slammed me up against the lockers multiple times. And the most disturbing thing was he was smiling when he was doing it, because he knew that I couldn't do anything. He was almost daring me to push him back, to fight back in some way, because he knew I would get expelled if I fought back. It was just a display of domination, an exercise in him trying to humiliate me and him trying to dominate me. I mean, we both knew that if we came to it, I could take him because I was a big kid. I played tackle football. I was a middle linebacker. After my freshman year, I dropped out of the football team because I didn't like anyone on the team anyway. I knew I couldn't push back. I couldn't fight back. And so I just had to take it. And there was this low level of violence throughout the student body itself. Almost every day in the cafeteria, there'd be chants of fight, fight, fight. And people had to be broken up. Teachers had to intervene. I knew enough not to let myself get to the bottom of the student pecking order. At a school, there was a tradition where the seniors would throw pennies at the freshmen. And one day after school, me and my friends were walking towards the bus, and we heard these tinging of pennies hitting the ground, and there was a hail of pennies, and they're smacking against the shop window behind us. And across the street, there were seniors throwing pennies at us. And so I bent down and picked up a couple pennies and started throwing them back at the seniors. My friend Bob just said to me, "What are you doing? You're going to get us killed." I had this look of terror on his face. I'll never forget that look. It was within this context of fear and domination and viciousness and violence. It was within this context that I found the gaming group. And that's where I found my people, my community. We created an identity as gamers, not video gamers, as tabletop D&D players. Gaming gave me an instant community, gave me a sense of identity and connection. It was a good escape, but it also allowed me to look at my own life as if it were a game, to have a little bit of playful distance from my own life, to think more like, well, what if I did this? What if I didn't do that? It allowed me more creative flexibility and opening up to possibilities. And to that end, in this culture of hierarchy and corporal punishment, one of our friends wore an earring, which was a big deal. He didn't wear it during school hours. He wore it after school hours. I remember the economics teacher was goading the football players to beat him up. And he was a friend of ours, and he was out to us as bisexual. He was a theater person. We all were fine with it. Like, we assumed he was gay, but we were all cool with it. We all accepted him. It was just like, of course, it was not even a thought of being an issue, especially because he was in theater, and so he had access to girls, which we did not have access to. That never worked out, but the potential was there anyway. One day, one of the teachers there yanked on his earring and yanked it out and caused it to bleed. So homophobia was pretty intense, and threats from football players. So gaming, being a gamer, gives you, I think, sort of a playful relationship to life. So my friend Don and I came up with this fantasy of a student liberation army, SLA. It was just a joke. It was sometime after the Symbionese Liberation Army and Patty Hearst and all that stuff. And so we started putting stickers around the school, SLA. And I told my brother about it. He's like, if you really want to get them, riled up, circle the A. I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, that means anarchy. It's like, okay. So we circled the A, Student Liberation Army, SLA with a circled A. And we were having fun. All suddenly, everyone was talking about it. Everyone's like, well, who's the SLA? What is it? And then people came up to me and started whispering to me, hey, can I join the SLA? And I was like, sure, you're in. This was my senior year. Suddenly we had a movement. It started as a joke, a playful joke, turned into this movement of many people. And at the time, the tradition was for seniors to have Hawaiian Shirt Day because Hawaiian shirts had collars. And so we adopted that as our symbol of the revolution, was Hawaiian shirts, which we wore all the time because they had a collar. So technically they were part of the dress code, but we found the most obnoxious, ugly, terrible shirts we could find and wore them all the time. And the movement spread first among the gamers, the people with the imagination, the people who are like, hey, this sounds like an adventure. This sounds interesting. And from there, it spread to the burnouts. And they started asking, hey, can we get joined? Can we be on this? And more, we had different factions join us, except for the mainstream, the business majors and the jocks, the quote unquote popular kids, but they're, in an all boys high school, there's no popular kids. There's those who dominate and the marginalized, and we were the marginalized. So it's all the marginalized kids banding together, all the misfits, all the odd kids finally saying no, finally fighting back, finally saying, we matter too, finding our voice. And we started an underground newspaper that we distributed, and we were pushing for more representation in governance and dress code and matters of corporal punishment. And we had a few teachers who supported us, and their support was really important to us. They gave us classroom space and talked to us about strategy and gave us access to printers and things. And all this activity, the Hawaiian shirts, the underground newspaper, the threats of violence from the football team. So all of this was coming to a head in class picture day. We knew that was a big deal for the administration. All the class pictures were displayed in the hallway year after year. Everyone in the dress code, everyone with the hair code, the pride of the administration. And the picture went in the yearbook and then the school newspaper, but we had other plans. And so there it was, picture day. All of us standing on these bleachers, stacked on rows, the photographer there directing us. I looked across to my classmates. A third of us had Hawaiian shirts on, and a third of us wore black armbands to symbolize the death of individuality at our high school. We framed it that way, not so much for ourselves, but because we knew that would get them. Because they wanted, they had all this BS about creating these great individuals. And so we're going to stick it to them one last time by saying, that's all BS. You're not interested in that. So we asserted our individuality and protesting the loss of individuality. And when I looked at my fellow resistors, clad in Hawaiian shirts and black armbands, I didn't see the fear. I didn't see terror. What I saw was defiance, pride, smirking sense of humor, play, enjoyment, fulfillment. We knew we wouldn't win. There was no winning in this scenario. But that's not what life is about. That's not what the game is about. The game is about the adventure. It's about the resistance. It's about the experience. So if you ask me, can a few gamer geeks organize people to stand up against the big bad? I say, hell yes. Hell yes, we can. We have experience doing this in our imaginations all the time. That's what we do. It's what we're good at. So in Stranger Things, when the gamers are the ones organizing people and banding together, it totally rings true to me. Like the gamers can think beyond what is to what's possible and can think of strategies and how we need to work as a team and to coordinate and to do things together to accomplish some goal, to fight against the multi-tentacled evil monsters. And gaming also allowed me to think of my life as an adventure. So in high school, I was pretty shut down. I was really introverted, didn't talk much, would go around in like sweaters and like a puffy down vest. And yet I chose to apply to one college. And one college was Antioch College. And people talk about the Antioch Adventure. There's even a film called Antioch Adventure and Antioch Adventure 2, which I'm in briefly. Because when I went there as a prospective student, as a junior, everyone I talked to had these amazing stories of their lives and what they did. One guy rode trains across the United States, just hopped on trains and backpacked. And somebody else I talked to just got back from studying in Japan. And there were all these wonderful stories. And I wanted my life to be like that. I wanted to go on an adventure. And it was gaming that allowed me that distance and that, well, why not? To try that, to jump into that abyss. Because Antioch College had a co-op program. So half the time you were on campus studying. The other half you were out going into the world, working or traveling. And so I wound up going to Antioch. I did some really awesome things. And all those possibilities, they all start with the imagination. They all start with, what if I did this? What about that? What about this? And then the strategies, gaming strategies of, okay, how do I make that real? How do I bring that into existence? What do I need to do to get there, to reach that goal? And there's lots of obstacles in the way, and that's okay. They're just obstacles. Of course there are. And those are just things that need to be overcome on the way to achieving that goal. That whole playful way of looking at life is resilience. It is resilient. If we go back to the story, that news article that my dad got for me of that college kid who disappeared for a week because of D&D, I went back this morning and I looked that up. I wanted to get like the year correct, and it was 1979. But I read the rest of the story, and the rest of the story is tragic. It turns out that kid was in fact not playing D&D under those tunnels. That kid who was a DM was gay, and he was in the closet. And so he was filled, because of the homophobia at the time, he was filled with self-hate, and he went into the tunnels to commit suicide and to take quaaludes. That was unsuccessful. So then he went to an older friend's house, possibly an older lover, male, and that's where the private investigator found him. And so then he was safe. And so that was when the article was released, and he begged the reporter to not out him. So he would rather, and the parents would rather have the story of D&D is the bad guy here, when the bad guy was the homophobia, was the bigotry, was the hate. And unfortunately, that person went to Louisiana and worked in the oil fields and eventually committed suicide shortly thereafter. So when I think about D&D and role-playing and it being a community and the power that D&D has for so many people, if you go to D&D events or conventions or groups or whatever, you'll notice something really striking. Lots of neurodivergent people, lots of non-binary people, queer people. And I think it's so wonderful that people who are marginalized can find community, they can be whoever they want to be, and they're accepted for just who they are. Finding your people wherever they are and being able to be with them authentically, to be yourself with them and to be accepted by them is so important. And role-playing games and the role-playing community can, not always, right, but in general, it offers that to people, which I think is just amazing and so important. And so when I read about the sort of homophobic backlash to Stranger Things, I'm glad that Stranger Things didn't back away from these issues, and they provided a beacon for people. In these dark times where homophobia is on the rise, transphobia is on the rise, we need to pull together and make sure that people know that it's okay for them to be who they are with us, that we're a safe person to be with, to cultivate these communities of acceptance and recognition and safety for people to be whoever they are. If you're interested in getting involved in tabletop role-playing, one of the things to do is right now, like a lot of game shops and game stores are sort of blends of cafes and gaming centers. And so you can go there, there's ongoing games often where they're looking for players, or they have places for people to network and join a party or get involved. Or you can go to a gaming convention, and that's a good place to get introduction to certain games and figure out what you like or what genre you like. I have a few recommendations for you today of different things to get involved in. Of course, there's D&D, which is right now 5e is the edition, which is scaled down, makes a lot more sense. People really love it. I haven't played the 5e edition yet, But yes, I think that's a great place to start is if you're just like, hey, you want some friends to get together and do some role-playing, D&D, 5e, just go with it. They have starter kits. They have lots of resources. Start small. It's a world that everyone understands because of the Lord of the Rings and all that. Like, oh yeah, we're in a dungeon. There's a dragon. There's treasure. Got it. Go. If you have children or if you're looking for something on the meaningful but lighter side, I really recommend Mouse Guard. You're sort of a medieval knight, but you're a mouse. And so you have to protect other mice in your mouse community from like weasels and owls and all sorts of things. I've played this with my kids and they really loved it. I used stuffed animals and stuff and set up this adventure and they loved it. There's also Mouse Guard graphic novels, which I would highly recommend. They're beautifully illustrated and teach some really good stuff. A lot of wisdom in those pages. If you're into sci-fi, there's something called Eclipse Phase, which is a transhuman sci-fi tabletop RPG. And the PDFs for that are all available for free. You can download them. They have a Patreon if you want to support the project, if you're into it. You can give them some money. If you're already a gamer, I would highly recommend a group called Novus Ordo Seclorum. They run Call of Cthulhu events, and Call of Cthulhu is a mystery horror game based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. And they do events at all the major conventions in the United States, so Gen Con, Gary Con, Gamehole Con, etc., Chaosium Con. And their events are spectacular, amazing, weird, cool, challenging. I'm one of their play testers, so when they have an idea, I get to get a first run at it. But they're really creative. They do sound effects, they do lighting, they do all sorts of metagaming stuff, and people love their events. I can't recommend them enough. That's the Novus group, Novus Ordo Seclorum. Very mysterious. Tell them Michael Glavin sent you because you were listening to the podcast on Stranger Things, and they'll say, oh, cool, nice. I also want to give a shout out to the White Leviathan. A friend of mine, Alan, has created this amazing project. It's based on Moby Dick, but it's Call of Cthulhu version of Moby Dick. So it's horror meets Moby Dick, and it's epic in scale. It's not just an adventure now. It's many, many worlds, and all of his writing, he's putting it online for free. It's available. That's called White Leviathan, and it's high quality. It's the elite of the elite. I was fortunate enough to be able to play test it. We played for 2.5 years in New York City once a month, and it's an amazing adventure. Made some good friends there, really great people. So that's called White Leviathan by the Great Quail. If you are interested in vampires and solo adventures, this is more of for teenagers, grown-ups, with some more mature themes. But there's a book called 1,000-Year-Old Vampire by Tim Hutchins. He's a friend of mine. He does really interesting, great games. And this is a beautiful book where you create the story through prompts in the book and tell this really amazing adventure. And it's a game, but it's also a story. I would highly recommend it. My older son did it, and he really loved it. There are also some more collaborative versions, rule sets coming out, something called Powered by the Apocalypse, where the storytelling goes between the GM, the game master, and the players, depending on the dice rolls. And so the players can have a little bit more control on outcomes and twists of the adventure. I am creating my own role-playing scenario based on Powered by the Apocalypse. And the scenario is called Demons and Wonders. And it was meant to prepare us for the times we're going through now and the times that will come. It's set in Nazi-occupied France in Paris. And the main characters, there's 6 of them, are all undesirables from the Nazi point of view. There are 3 Jewish artists, a Romani character, an anarchist, a former nun from Spain, the Spanish Civil War, a gay Parisian man. And the adventure is them trying to get out of Nazi-occupied France. And it's a magical realism game, so it becomes surreal. There's a surreal, fantastical element running throughout. And what I wanted to do was personify sort of the challenges of living in an authoritarian regime, and then to put it within an imaginative context so that we can start to think through and act through these difficult choices that we are confronting and that we will confront over the next X number of years. So if you're interested in that, I've already play tested it once and it went really well. I'm planning on running it again a few more times in the next few months. And eventually I would love to get it published so that other people can play it and mess around with it. So that's called Demons and Wonders. And if you're interested in it, let me know and I can fit you into a play testing group. Your action item for this week is to use your imagination to solve a problem. So let's start with something small. Don't start with something that's traumatic or something overwhelming, but something that's been an issue. I want you to use your imagination to personify that issue. If it's procrastination, say, like, I just can't get work done. So what is procrastination? If it was a monster, what kind of monster would procrastination be? And then in this scenario, who are you? Where are you in relationship to this procrastination monster? Like, is it this sticky amorphous blob that's like covered you, right? And so, okay, it's holding you down and you can't move. Okay, so then who are you? What are your abilities? What are you trying to accomplish? What magic items do you have? Who else is in your party? Who can help you? What do you need to do in order to overcome this procrastination monster and achieve your goal and be the hero? If you want to get some paper out and sketch it and sketch what the monster looks like, what you look like, who's in your party, who are your allies? Do you have potions? Do you have spells? Do you have magic items? What can you do? What can other people do? How can you pull your resources to overcome this monster to achieve what you want to achieve? That's your action item for this week. Think about a problem as if you were in a role-playing game and come up with creative ideas for how to solve your problem. Next week in Resilience in Dark Times, we will cover resilience essentials. I'll talk about all the best things to do. Now, this is episode 16, so we have 15 episodes of help with resilience and different techniques and tools and different ways of looking at it. I will boil all of that down to the essentials. What is your resilience survival pack? Like, if you can only just have, I'll pick some arbitrary number, 5 things, what would those 5 things be? What are the 5 most important aspects or practices of resilience? Before we end, I really want to ask you to do me a favor. This is Stranger Things inspired resilience. So share this episode with a Stranger Things fan that you know. I'd really love to see our community grow and expand and get stronger and to have us support each other. And that would really help. So I'd really appreciate that. So that's next time in Resilience in Dark Times. Thanks for joining us on Resilience in Dark Times. Remember, building resilience isn't a solo project. It's something we do together. If this episode helped you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit resilienceindarktimes.com to join our community of people who refuse to give up. Until next time, stay strong, stay connected, and keep resisting.